Did you know that one of Hollywood's most glamorous love stories turned into one of the most talked-about courtroom dramas of all time? Yes, the very same relationship that once looked picture-perfect on red carpets and magazine covers ended, up unraveling on live television, watched by millions around the world. And it all centered on two people who couldn't be more famous, more fascinating, and more controversial: Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Their story had everything: love, beauty, fame, heartbreak, and one of the fiercest battles the industry has ever seen. It's a story that proves how quickly Hollywood can turn a fairy tale into a nightmare, and today we're walking through the beauty, the brilliance, and the battle that defined them. If you've been following their drama, then you already know it wasn't easy to ignore. Even if you weren't interested in celebrity gossip before, chances are you found yourself scrolling through clips, reading posts, or catching headlines. It was everywhere. People who didn't usually care about Hollywood suddenly had strong opinions. Some defended Johnny passionately, while others stood by Amber. It was impossible to stay neutral. But how did it all come to this? How did two actors go from falling in love on a movie set to tearing each other apart in a courtroom with the world watching like it was the biggest reality show on Earth? Let's start at the beginning. The year was 2009. Johnny Depp was already a global superstar. By then, he had decades of legendary roles behind him: Captain Jack Sparrow, Edward Scissorhands, Willy Wonka. He wasn't just an actor, he was an icon. Amber Heard, on the other hand, was a rising star. Young, beautiful, full of ambition, she was on her way up, grabbing attention with her performances and her presence. They met on the set of The Rum Diary, a film full of passion, chaos, and adventure. And maybe in some strange way, the energy of that film spilled into real life. Sparks flew between them. On-screen chemistry turned into off-screen connection. It wasn't immediate. They stayed friends for a while. Johnny was still in a long-term relationship, raising kids, living a life away from the chaos of Hollywood gossip. But as years passed, things changed. Johnny and Amber grew closer. By the time they officially became a couple, fans were fascinated. She was young, stunning, and bold. He was seasoned, charming, and mysterious. Together, they made headlines everywhere they went. In 2015, they got married. The wedding wasn't just a private union, it was news around the globe. To the outside world, they looked like a dream couple. Red carpets, paparazzi flashes, magazine covers calling them Hollywood's hottest pair. Smiles, hand-holding, glamorous appearances. Everything about them screamed star power. For fans, it felt like watching a modern fairy tale, but as we've seen too many times in Hollywood, fairy tales often come with cracks behind the scenes, and soon whispers began. The tabloids started picking up stories of tension, of fights, of things that didn't quite match the picture-perfect smiles. People started wondering, was this just another celebrity marriage under the strain of fame, or was something much darker happening behind closed doors? By 2016, the whispers turned into explosions. Amber filed for divorce, but it wasn't just a split. It came with shocking accusations. She claimed Johnny had been abusive, and suddenly their story was no longer just about love. It was about violence, about survival, about a fight for truth. Headlines exploded around the world. Amber became a symbol of speaking out. Johnny's reputation crumbled almost overnight. Fans who once adored him were left in shock, not knowing what to believe. The internet divided instantly. People picked sides. Team Heard, Team Depp. Arguments broke out everywhere. On Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube. Some believed Amber completely. Others defended Johnny with their whole hearts. Suddenly, it wasn't just a divorce. It was a cultural moment, a global debate about relationships, fame, and the truth. But Johnny didn't stay silent. He fought back, claiming he was the victim, not the abuser. He filed lawsuits, saying Amber's accusations had ruined his life and his career. And this is where their story transformed from a private heartbreak into a public war. The legal battle that followed was like nothing Hollywood had ever seen. When the trial began, it was unlike any other. Millions of people tuned in every single day to watch the Courtroom livestream. It was everywhere. TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, clips of the trial dominated social media. Johnny's smirks went viral. Amber's tearful moments became memes. Lawyers became celebrities overnight. People analyzed every expression, every word, every slip of paper. It was surreal. It was like a TV series with episodes dropping daily, but this wasn't entertainment. It was real, painful, life-altering. Inside that courtroom, the battle lines were drawn. Johnny's lawyers presented evidence, audio recordings, text messages, witness testimonies. They painted a picture of a man wronged, a man fighting not just for his career but for his identity. On the other side, Amber stood firm, repeating her story, presenting her own evidence, insisting that she had spoken out not for fame, but because she believed it was the right thing to do. The clash was intense, emotional, and unrelenting. There were moments that shocked people. At one point, Johnny said, "The truth is the only thing I'm interested in." That single line echoed far beyond the courtroom. Fans quoted it. Supporters used it as a rallying cry. It wasn't just about defamation anymore. It felt like a fight for redemption. Meanwhile, Amber's words about justice and survival also struck chords, reminding people that no matter which side you were on, these were deeply painful stories being told. Experts jumped in too. Psychologists analyzed body language. Legal. Commentators broke down arguments, predicting outcomes. The trial became more than just a lawsuit, it was a cultural event. For weeks, you couldn't escape it. Every news outlet covered it. Every social media platform debated it. Every conversation seemed to circle back to Johnny and Amber. And then it ended. The verdict came down, and with it, a wave of emotions rippled across the world. For Johnny, it was more than just a legal win. It was a personal turning point. For years he had lived under the shadow of doubt, painted as a man whose legacy might never recover. But in that moment, when the jury sided with him, he found something that had slipped from his hands long ago. Redemption. It didn't erase the pain. It didn't undo the years of humiliation, but it did restore a piece of his name. Slowly, the world that had turned its back on him began to lean in again. His reputation, once in tatters, began to rebuild brick by brick as fans celebrated the decision like it was their own victory. Social media lit up with messages of joy, hashtags in his support trended for days, and people shared clips of him, smiling in court as though they had witnessed the ending of a long, exhausting saga. Hollywood, once hesitant, began to open its doors again. Studios that had distanced themselves quietly reached out. Producers started talking about projects, whispers of collaborations filled the air, and little by little he stepped back into the space that had defined his life for decades. But what was perhaps most important was that Johnny wasn't rushing. He wasn't chasing headlines or scrambling for roles. Instead, he returned to the part of himself that had always been pure, untouched by tabloids and trials: music. He went back on stage, guitar in hand, standing before audiences who cheered not just for his songs but for his resilience. Each performance wasn't just entertainment, it was a statement. It was proof that the man they had admired for so long still had fire in him, still had stories to tell, still had an artistry that no courtroom could take away. He reconnected with himself not as a defendant but as a creator, a performer, an artist. And in that process, he began to heal. Film deals soon followed. The industry, realizing the power of his name, began to offer him roles again. There was excitement in the air, talk of comebacks, of characters he might bring to life, of scripts that had been waiting for someone like him. For Johnny, it was a second chance, not just to work, but to remind the world why he mattered in the first place. For him, the verdict was more than words on paper. It was freedom to live again, to create without the chains of accusation, to step back into a spotlight that for a time had been unbearably harsh. Amber, on the other hand, found herself facing a very different reality. When the judgment was read, it wasn't only the legal loss that weighed heavy. It was the tidal wave of public opinion. The internet, already harsh toward her during the trial, now turned into an avalanche. Memes, commentary, criticism even. Cruelty poured in from every corner. For many, she was no longer just an actress. She became a symbol of mistrust, someone defined more by the case than by her work. And while Johnny's supporters celebrated, Amber's supporters dwindled, drowned out by the noise of the larger crowd. The criticism wasn't just online. It affected her career, too. Studios hesitated. Roles that might have once been hers slipped away. Public appearances became rare. She began to step away from the Hollywood spotlight, not because she had lost her ambition, but because she knew the world wasn't ready to see her as anything but the woman from that trial. So she moved. Abroad she tried to rebuild in her own way. She chose quiet streets over flashing cameras, a low-key life over the pressure of red carpets. Away from Hollywood she found a space where she could breathe, where she could exist. Without every glance being dissected, still she didn't vanish completely. She appeared occasionally, sometimes for projects, sometimes for causes she believed in, but it was different now. Every move she made was measured, cautious, as if each step carried the weight of 1,000 judgments. While Johnny was embraced. With open arms, Amber carried the heavy burden of being defined by a trial she could never escape. For her, the verdict wasn't just the end of a case. It was the start of a new chapter, one that forced her to live in the shadows of what had come before. And so, while Johnny walked into a future that felt like a second chance, Amber faced one that demanded resilience of a different kind. Both of them changed, both of them scarred, and both of them forever marked by the battle that ended, but never truly left their lives. Their lives may never cross paths again, but their names are forever tied. Not just because of love, not just because of courtrooms, but because their story became one of the most unforgettable sagas of modern Hollywood. It was more than a divorce, it was more than a trial. It was a mirror reflecting fame, power, and the way personal stories become public property in the internet age. Think about it. A relationship that should have been private became one of the most public events of our time. Everyone became a juror, a commentator, a spectator. Strangers felt invested in lives that weren't theirs, cheering, booing, laughing, and crying at moments that, in reality, were devastating for the people involved. That's the cost of fame in today's world. Once your story escapes your hands, it belongs to the public. So what do we take away from all this? Maybe it's a reminder that beauty and brilliance can hide cracks. That even in Hollywood, where everything glitters, real lives are messy, painful, and complicated. Maybe it's a warning about the dangers of public opinion, or maybe it's simply a story of two people who loved, lost, and fought until nothing was left. And now it's your turn. What do you think about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard's journey? Was it a tragic love story? Was it a cautionary tale about fame and relationships? Or was it just another reminder that behind every glamorous photo, there's a story we may never fully understand? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know your take. If you've made it this far, don't stop here. Check out our other video where we break down Johnny Depp's comeback story. It's one you don't want to miss. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into Hollywood's most dramatic story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss the next one. Because in Hollywood, there's always another chapter waiting to be told.